A couple weeks ago, there were some breakout groups, and one of them was about networking. How many have attended? How many have attended that one? Okay, so just a few of you. So this won't be, hopefully, not too much of a repeat. But I just wanted to share some personal thoughts on the value of networking. And the first question I'd like to ask is, what percent of jobs, this is from some recent surveys from job placement, what percent of jobs do you think people who take new jobs, what percent of them come from networking versus these other sources? Obviously, this is a talk about networking, and so as you could guess, it's going to come as most important. But what's your percent? Any guesses? How many of you think that 30% of jobs come from networking? 40%. 80. Any other guesses? 75. Those are actually a little high. So it's about 40%, 25% through job boards, search firms. But I did want to contrast that with my own career. So I have held 11 positions. You can see them there. And so for me personally, 9 of them have really come through networking. And just two of them came through a search firm who were looking for people. But so for me personally, it was 80% came from networking. And I think that's typically true as you become more senior and have more executive type positions. It really is through your network that becomes very valuable. So why do you think most jobs, especially senior jobs, come through networking? What are some ideas? Why does that turn out to be a way that most companies really hire folks?
They already kind of know you.
Yeah. Other ideas?
They can base it off of someone they trust, and so if they trust you, it's easier for the company to trust you as well, as opposed to hiring someone you don't know that you want to interview.
Yeah, good.
It's cheaper.
Yep. If you can avoid search firms, typically search firms will be on retainer, and if you can get, or sometimes they're on a commission, so if you can just go around that, you don't have to pay them.
Also, I could be wrong, but the skill set required for higher level jobs is usually less quantifiable in some ways, maybe a little bit more subjective, so
Yeah.
it's kind of harder to measure who might be the best applicant if you're just looking at paper resumes. So.
Yeah, very good. And I think you've covered the things that, so networking will provide more information. They're always going to choose someone known over unknown. It's actually quite a risk for HR internally to hire the wrong person, so they'd rather have some more evidence. And interviews really don't provide a great deal of information. They're pretty quick. It's hard to know, especially as you get more senior. And as I think was said down here, chemistry is a really big part of why someone hires you. As you get more senior, you're probably going to have a similar skill set to a number of people, but then it comes down to, do they like you? Do you get along with them? Do they feel like they'd enjoy being with you as they travel to different places and go on long business trips or work long hours? So chemistry is a big part. So, okay, let's talk about what it is and give you some thoughts on. So first of all, I just put a list of things, and I should have asked you guys first, but as you can see, so as I think about networking, meeting people, knowing people, helping people, staying in touch, sharing ideas, be polite and complimentary, be interesting, be entertaining, very natural and easy, give much more than you receive. So I think, for me, a key, typically people will see through very obvious or blatant attempts just to network and so that they know you. So someone in position is going to be pretty sensitive about people just randomly reaching out to them. So it's a lot more effective to either find some area of common interest or to share an idea that you may have for their company, or somehow try to find a way where you know a common person that can introduce them to you. as opposed to just sort of blindly reaching out and say, hey, I'd love to get to know you or something. I think folks though, they will be open to, I'm looking for a job, I'm really interested in your company, I would really appreciate a 15-minute call just for you to tell me a little bit about your firm, and I could introduce myself a little bit like that. So if you keep it pretty short, you can probably get away with something more blind. But really, it's most effective is when you know something about the business or about them, you've read something recently that's changed in their business, or you have a new idea that you said, I'd love to share this with you. I found that I have most of the jobs, especially as you get senior, they're not posted. You're not going to find them on their website. You're not going to find them listed anywhere. And so one reason to be networking is that you're aware of those openings. But also, I found that I'll have a certain skill set and I'll say, would you ever be interested in doing this? And I just pitch it to them. So I almost pitch my own job description. And you'll find as you go along that as you're just aware of a company and you realize maybe there's something that they need, you can help out. For instance, when I moved to Utah, I felt like one of the things I had of assets was I knew a lot of people in the Bay Area. I knew a lot of tech firms. And I started doing some work here. At the company I was working with some web design firms. And so I thought they might have some interest in me making some introductions to folks that I know in the Bay Area. They're a cheaper resource. They're typically, these firms are smaller, they can be more responsive, and so someone like a Google or a Yahoo many times will outsource some of their web development, and so I could just kind of make an introduction. So I went and just talked to some firms and said, this may be really valuable. And so it was just kind of an idea of thinking, okay, what do I have, what am I good at, and then talking to companies. Before I show the next slide, so as you think about networking, what are some ideas around who do you network with? Who are the people that you would naturally sort of think about networking with? Any ideas? Friends? Classmates? Other ideas? As in me personally? That's nice, thank you, that's a compliment. So here's a list. Co-workers. So as you start your new job, get to know other people, especially outside of your own functional area. Others in the company, others in the industry. Network with companies that hire. So how many of you are familiar with private equity firms? So these are firms that they raise funds and then they invest in companies, and typically they're doing it sort of mid-sized to larger sized companies. So as they make investments in companies, they typically are hiring new people, either because there's a lot of growth or they're not real happy with the current management. And so getting to know folks who then will place people into those positions, reach out to search firms. As you go along, you can find a list of them. Just reach out and say, hey, here's my resume, here's the type of things that I'm good at, just keep me in mind, I'd love to come meet with you. So these are people that place people into other companies. Some other ones that are overlooked and maybe a little undervalued, just your natural friends, your neighbors. I've had job opportunities come from this next one where I would be standing on the sideline watching a kid's soccer game, and so we got to know some of the parents, and I was hired by one of the parents, as well as casual acquaintances. I think there's some definite don'ts with networking. Obviously, insincerity. People can really see through if they think you're just a social climber, if you're just someone using them. They know you're reaching out to them and that you're trying to build a network, but when that's your only interest, people really see through that. Constant selling of yourself gets really old very quickly. And then I think this is actually something that can help you become better at networking and have less reservations about doing it is I don't think it has to be forced. I think it can be very natural, and that you're going to naturally network with people who are like you and that you enjoy being around. I don't think you have to feel like, oh, how do I network with this person, and they're so different, and I don't think we'd ever get along. It probably doesn't work. And there's enough people out there that are going to be like you, are going to be similar in temperament, have similar personalities, similar interests, that it'll be really natural to network with them and just reach out to them, and don't bother with people that you don't naturally connect with, because those probably don't really lead anywhere. Okay, how? What are some things that you've done to reach out to network? Or what do you think, what are some tactical, very practical things that you might do to network?
I've done like informational interviews. If there's somebody that I'm really interested in my organization or whatever, I'll just set up time to talk with them for like 20 minutes about what they do. Because then you're interested in them, you're finding out more about their career and stuff. But you can also say, they usually ask about you and you say, oh, well, this is what I do, this is what I'm interested in, you know, if anything's available.
Yeah, terrific. Many times too, as you get your entry-level job, it's not going to be your ideal job. You many times, okay, I'll just take that. But then as you learn about the rest of the company, then you find out other openings that are more interesting. And so then, as you know people, you can naturally move over. Other ideas?
I've met with a lot of my dad's coworkers and just being sincere with them and trying to be nice and help them and help your parents and whatever they do. And that lets that coworkers see you and like, hey, this guy's got a good child that will work.
Where do you meet them? Do you just go to their house?
Just visiting with my dad's work.
Okay.
And then when they come over to visit or whatever.
Yeah, good.
I just wanted to hit on the acquaintances one. Because like one of my the best connection I've probably ever gotten, I actually got through the missionary. We were teaching his girlfriend, and he does the best at making at Jeffries. And then I just sent him an email saying, hey, talk to your girlfriend and we want to share a message with you, it's long distance. And he reached out to me, and like on Sunday I'm flying out to work with his team. I've talked to him several times, and now it's like been like the best opportunity. So
Outstanding. Yeah.
go to missionary.
I would say one thing that I really want to get better at is just bringing up what it is that I do and what I'm passionate about in a career setting, just a normal conversation with people.
Uh-huh.
Because like, you're talking about acquaintances, friends, it's by bringing up what you do and what you're studying that connection can be made and that potential connection can be made with professionals in that career.
Yeah, good. Other ideas?
I think with every connection or lead you have, don't force it, but it's really valuable if you can try to get 2 or 3 more connections out of each person.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Other ideas? One thing that Eric was saying earlier about interviewing, I would also recommend for networking, and it may sound a little anal, but you're going to soon have so many contacts that you need to really essentially keep a spreadsheet of them. I have a spreadsheet of hundreds of people that I know with their contact information, what's the last thing we talked about, and I'll typically, it's not as if I have some set schedule, but I will regularly go back and look at that and just email people and say, what's the latest? One person I know who does a bunch of startups in New York, I'll regularly ping him either with a new idea. He's really good at sounding board. So if I get involved with something that's smaller, I will, and either an investment or maybe be involved with giving advice to the company. I'll ask his ideas. What do you think? Is this a good idea? Is this so I have sort of my own, among my contacts, I just have a sounding board of people from different backgrounds where I just say, what do you think? These are smart people. What do you think about this idea? Is this one out to lunch? What are the things that you would think would make, would give you some pause about this? So I have a spreadsheet, and I just reach out to people regularly. What's the latest? Did you sell your company? Did you get funding? How's it going? Have you had success? And here's what I'm doing. And so it's actually really fun. I mean, I don't look at it as a chore. I just think you meet a lot of really interesting people, and keeping in touch with them is really valuable. And I do think that when you are the proactive one, it pays a lot of benefits. Most people are so busy that they kind of forget, or they don't reach out as much. And if you're the one doing that, it pays a lot of benefits. I just think it keeps you in touch. Every time I reach out to someone, they say, thank you so much for reaching out. It's been too long. We should catch up. Let's get on the phone. Let's have a 10-minute call, and I'll tell you what I'm doing. And it's just interesting. So so I would recommend that. Okay, let's see. I had introduce yourself to people you see. That's a pretty common one, but that many of us have a good deal of fear about that. But when you're in a business setting, don't be shy about, this is who I am, how are you, nice to see you. Make an observation about them or what they're doing. Let me ask you for more information. These relationships are going to build over time. Don't get too anxious if you don't make this immediate connection that you feel like is going to last your life. They take some time, and go out to dinner, check in regularly. When I read something, I think, oh, that really reminds me of this person, and I'll reach out to them and say, hey, did you see this? Or this really reminds me of what you're doing. Okay. Let me take a few minutes about just why networking. We talked about why it's important and why people use it when they hire, but I did want to give you a couple thoughts on try to emphasize a little bit the importance. I think the first one is as simple as I've had about a 25-year career since I graduated from here. I've been at 11 companies. That's about an average of 2 years. And I don't consider myself someone constantly looking for the new thing, or because I know some folks who they will, especially out in the Bay Area, people hopped around all the time because they felt like, okay, this is a new technology, and okay, I'm on to the next thing. I wasn't trying to do that. It's just that I think the nature of the economy now is such that there's just a lot of turnover, and you need to be ready for things and expecting a lot of change. One of the reasons is 8 of the companies I was at, I really joined them when they were in the midst of really good high growth. And very soon after I joined, usually within 2 years or less, there was a major downturn. So one firm I joined was, I left Bain Dallas. I went to a very large, successful financial services company. And I think about the first week on the job, I had someone come into my office and say, we're probably selling the company. They're splitting it up. And I said, that would have been nice to know during the interview process. So I show up there, they tell me, we're splitting it, and so within a year, the company had been sold, and all split up. And so then it gave me an opportunity to think about what else I wanted to do. Did I want to stay with the kind of new split up company or do something else? But that literally happened the first week I show up on the job. Another one I want to tell you about is probably personally the most painful thing I went through, but really interesting. So I was at Compaq Computer in the late 90s. They bought a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, which is a really large company. Digital had this search engine called AltaVista, which at that time was the leading search engine in the world. And as you can see here, here's a list of the top 10 websites. It's kind of a funny list since many of these are no longer around. But AOL was the #1 site. And you can see AltaVista there as number 10. But what's a little more interesting is that at that time, AltaVista was actually the search engine behind AOL, Microsoft, and Yahoo. So the top 3 sites, they didn't have their own search. They used AltaVista, so we powered their site. So if you went to Yahoo at that time, it was AltaVista search. And then when I went out to California to join AltaVista from Compaq, we put a team out there and we were going to spin it out and take it public at that time. We were doing a joint venture with Time Warner. So they were the 8th largest site. They were going to provide the content. So we thought, that's a pretty good place to be in. And within a pretty short period of time, first the joint venture fell through with Time Warner. And it came down to who had controlling interests, which is something you'll typically see. So the fight was over who had 51%. Whoever has 51% really calls the shots. So there was a lot of fighting about it. And our CEO didn't want to give up control. So we went separate paths. They wanted 51%, we wanted 51%. It ended. The other thing that happened was the market burst. And then the third thing that happened is, and we were then sold to a company back then that was a very high-flying internet conglomerate called CMGI. And they forced us, against our wishes, to change from just focusing on search to becoming a portal. And I'll show you what happened. So this is what happened to the market. This is the S&P, but the Dow had a kind of similar chart. So as you can see there, if you look at the bottom, 2000. So you see the market gaining, and really there was a famous term during that time by Greenspan, who was the head of the Fed. Irrational exuberance is what he called it. So there was clearly a bubble. And so as you see there, if you look at the bottom, 2000, and then you see the A there, where the line is, April. We had filed to go public, had finished our roadshow. We were going public in April. We held a IPO party. And the thing that dampened the IPO party quite a bit is that we decided the day before not to go out because the Dow dropped 500 points a day for that week. So in April, there was the absolute peak. The market sort of stayed around a little bit, and then it just collapsed. And so we pulled our IPO. We said, let's wait for a better window. We have some time. This isn't just going to all go away. It all went away. So the market was done, and we never got out. The second thing, this is a very famous chart in the industry, is once we changed strategies, so we changed from just being completely focused on search, having a very simple homepage, to then wanting to be a media company and compete with the AOLs and MSNs and Yahoos. As you can imagine, we all of a sudden were competitors to people who were using our search. All of a sudden, Yahoo, AOL, MSN, they considered us a competitor. So they dropped us. And who did they pick up? Who did they insert as their search engine? Was Google. So over a period of a few months there, we call this a famous X chart, because the change in market share over a pretty short period of time is pretty remarkable. So Google ascended and took all of our customers, which further really hurt Alta Vista. So within about a year period, we went from Sure Thing, one of the biggest search sites, the only one not public, this great joint venture, market's doing really well, to being almost extinct. I mean, the thing was just run over. The market crashed. Google took our spot because we changed strategies. So I had to find a new job. So I just think we live in an era where that has just accelerated since 2000. And I think it's just a reality, which makes another case for why networking and making sure that you're aware of a number of other things that's going on. As a final thought, I would highly recommend this book. This is written by the founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, a very bright guy, and he has a lot of super thoughts about networking and why it's necessary. One of the things he constantly does is he's just really involved with a lot of other projects just to make sure he has some options. So I think that's worthwhile. Any questions on networking? Other thoughts, comments? Okay. In the remaining few minutes, I wanted to shift gears a little bit. One thing that we hear quite a bit from students is the challenge of work-life balance. And how do we do that? Are there any thoughts that we can share about that? So let me share a couple thoughts. So from a former prophet, he says, most do not set priorities to guide them in allocating their time, and most forget that the first priority should be, what's your guess? What did President Harold B. Lee say was our first priority? Pardon? Vocation? Providing for your family? Other thoughts? Everybody agree with that? Okay. He said, actually, maintaining your own spiritual and physical strength. I found that really eye-opening. Because mostly you hear it's either family, vocation, maybe church. He's saying your own spiritual and physical strength. Okay, what do you think comes next? Family. Then church. Then professions. So his order: spiritual, physical strength, family, church, profession. Now, I've heard others who I think highly of, they would strongly say that profession needs to be pretty high because you can't almost do these other things unless you're providing. So, but I think his point was just to say, you need to make sure you're getting time to keep up your own spiritual and physical strength. And just some thoughts. I think it is, today we have a particular challenge, perhaps unique in history. We live in a really different time. One thing is that it is possible to do most things we want all the time. We live in an era you could do, if you loved sports, you could do that 24/7. If you loved work, you can do it 24/7. You can, wherever you are, you can be working. I think another challenge is that there is more payback than ever from time spent at work. You can earn more money. The enticement to spend those extra hours at work pay off. And most of you will go to jobs that there is a very high payoff from doing that incremental amount of work. So there is a constant pressure, and you can justify yourself saying, I'm just providing for my family. I just want to provide more. And you can spend those extra 2 to 3 hours every day when you could be home with your family a little bit. You could be there working, advancing your career, and it'll pay off. Another is that we really are competing with and working with people who don't value balance or family life. You are a very small minority. And that's even changed since I've started working. But it was fairly that case even when I started, but I think it's worse. I just think you're going to go out there with people who, many of them are not religious, so they have no church. Many of them will be single until their 30s, 40s. And so you're going to be competing with them. You're going to have to compete with them. So some thoughts on how to achieve balance. One is, as you do with your money, hopefully, where you're budgeting and things, really evaluate how you spend your time. How many of you have ever done the exercise of thinking through a week, putting different categories down and saying, how much time do I spend on these different things? Has anyone done that? It's a pretty eye-opening exercise. When you go through and put down all of these hours and all of a sudden you say, I'm not spending on things that line up with my priority. A second thought is that you're going to have to make choices between good and best, not good and bad. So you're going to have to put things aside, not do things, or choose to do other things because they're better, not because what you're laying aside is bad. It's just that you have different priorities. Stop doing things. That's going to be hard. And typically that means stop doing things that probably are more hobby or leisure. I'm a very avid participant in sports. I like to do a lot of sports. I like to watch sports. So I haven't given all that up. but I've definitely had to curtail it because there's other things that are more important. I can't do it all the time. Another thought is that there will be periods of imbalance. You're never going to have all of these things in perfect balance. And as you start out your career, as you start out your family, you're going to be really busy, especially with work. And I don't think there's any way of getting around that. But just think of it, okay, take a longer term view. You're going to be a little out of balance initially, but longer term you can make that balance. Some thoughts from a state presidency counselor that I thought were really relevant and useful. One is, his thought is, our life is designed so we don't have enough time to do everything we want, or may even feel as worthy. There's not enough time. It's designed that way. You ever thought about that? Because you always think, oh, I can do everything. Everything that's important we have time to do. I don't know if that's the case. So I found this really interesting, where he said, it's designed that way, so it will require a choice. And then our choices will truly show what we really value and treasure most. So we are in a situation you cannot do everything. You're going to have to pick and choose, and those choices will show the Lord what you really value. Okay, a couple thoughts on my own experience. Very, very few people I have run across, I feel like, achieve balance. And I think they have two issues. It's kind of a bipolar distribution. So they skew to one extreme or the other. Some people spend too much time on church and family, and their careers suffer. And they feel like they're doing it for a good reason, and it's hard to question their motivation, but they spend too much time. Others, though, then spend too much time working. And so they sacrifice time with family, they sacrifice how active they are with the church, all for their work. And many of them feel very justified because they can say, I'm just trying to provide for my family. I'm just trying to do the best for my family. And that's hard to argue with. And so I'm not really, I just think it's really hard. And you're going to have to work at it, but try to stay away from either extreme. And I think either extreme really leads to problems. I've seen people, very faithful, service-oriented people who want to spend time with their family, who can't keep a job. And their employers know it, and their employers don't value what they value. And they're typically pushed out, they don't advance. It's hard for them to provide. But then I've also seen these other people where they become so involved with their careers that they sacrifice their health. That's usually the first thing to go, and then typically their family. And as a thought on that, I think it's such a hard challenge that it is something that requires not only your own thoughts and experimentation, but you need to ask for divine help to do it. Because I don't think any of us have the wisdom or the experience to really know what should we be giving up now, where should we be investing our time. And so unless you're getting divine help, I don't think you'll be successful at this, and something will suffer. And let me just end with that. Is I do think one thing I can say I've tried to do is try to find balance. And I've been in industries that require a lot of working time, as all of you will be. There aren't jobs out there that are 9 to 5. But I feel like because I've always really desired to find a balance, that I've had help. And sometimes that's meant you move. Sometimes that's meant that you kind of give up a job because you feel like it's taking too much time. But I always feel like I've had help, and that in the long run, the things that really matter, I feel like I've had help in having enough time to spend there with things that really matter and still provide for my family and take care of that. So I just want to let you know it can be done. Don't give up hope. And as you enter the workforce, Eric and I were talking about this. We both had people, when we were here in school, we both had people come to us and say, you're not going to believe this, but you have more free time now than you will the rest of your life. And we just thought, how can that be? How in the world can that be true? And both of us sat there and said, it's true. Life gets busier. Think about it. You have a spouse, you have a family, you have a job, you have church callings. It gets busier, but you can find help. And enjoy being here today. Thanks.